Hello again, ladies and gents, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the AJ Roberts Show. Again, we are traveling down under. This time, we are going to be speaking to the leader of the Australia One Party, 24 years previous Australian Army service, including SAS as a Lieutenant Colonel, Mr. Riccardo Bosi. Welcome to the AJ Roberts Show.
AJ, thanks for having me. Very kind.
I've been mega excited about this all week, and I've been saying for weeks that I need to get Riccardo on the show. And in I guess a good soldier fashion, you just keep chipping away and chipping away and chipping away until I guess you finish the mission. And in this case, it was to get Riccardo on the show. So I pressed the right buttons. I'm really glad you're here. And so are all my followers, because they're all huge fans, and the Australian and New Zealand fan base of the show has risen massively over the last few weeks, and it's been an absolute pleasure of mine to share what is going on in Australia to the British public and to the wider communities. So obviously getting you on the show today, absolutely pivotal point and a real critical point, really, because of what's happening in Australia right now and the part you've had to play in, really fighting back against this crazy globalist agenda which has taken over your country, in more ways than anywhere else in the world. So, I mean, if we just peel it back to the start, for example, January, February last year, did you envisage it being anything like what we're seeing now?
Yeah, we did back in when it first kicked off. And the reason I saw what was coming was because previously I had run as a candidate for a short-lived party called the Australian Conservatives. I ran as a Senate candidate. And that was driven by sheer necessity. We'd just come back from 5 years in the Middle East, and we got back to Oz, and my God, the degradation of every aspect of Australian society was so clear to us, having been away for so long. And even when we arrived at the airport, it was dirty, it was grubby, the staff was surly and rude, the uniforms were messy, and it just, you and I have probably flown into third world countries with better greetings than Sydney Airport did, and that set the alarm bells off. And we got in, we realised that my wife and I realised we'd better do something. So I ran as a Senate candidate. That failed experiment ended, but a bunch of us decided we had to do something about it. And so we formed this new group. We were trying to figure out what it was, but we knew we had to continue the fight. So we decided to start a party from scratch. So when we got to January last year, very quickly, I did my ring around to find out the medical aspects of what was going on and what we anticipated were going to be the future trends. And even back then, they told us, look, this COVID thing, it might be virulent, but it's extremely fragile. So go into the hot shower, breathe in through your nose the hot steam, because it lives in the nasal cavity because it's can't stand too much heat. So if you just go in the shower a couple of times a day, breathing in the hot steam, it'll kill the bug. So that was point number one. And very quickly, I was saying to people, look, this is going to be no jab, no job, no jab, no transport, no jab, no social security, no jab, no kids. And, as usual, we were called lunatics and extremists, but it's all been proven to be absolutely true. So we picked this a long time ago. And so we knew exactly what was going on well before, I guess, the main proportion of the population. And certainly the media still isn't covering it, but we've been making great progress ever since.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if, as a critical thinker, and an outcome thinker, especially with an extensive military background, if you can almost foresee potential threats ahead, you can kind of like put yourself in the enemy's shoes, so to speak, and just reverse engineer it quite nicely, can't you? And just see it all unfold, which is exactly what I've done and my colleagues have done over the last sort of like almost 2 years now. And I guess it's understanding it all the way along and just thinking to yourself, why would they do this and what's the objective? And in this case, you can see the objective. One of the objectives is mass genocide and sacrificing children. It's a real cynical part of this whole global agenda. And obviously, Australia's being kind of used really as a testing ground, as some might say. What do you see happening over the next few months? I know, because I know each state's different, because it's difficult to say, but as an overall arching vision? Where do you see things going? Because there are things they are crumbling, aren't they? I can see it from here in UK.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's just talk about that. The combat indicators. You and I are accustomed to looking at the battlefield and saying, okay, I can see how things are running here. And the combat indicators are in our favour. And I'll just give you some local Australian examples. The Premier of New South Wales, one of our most populous states, Gladys Berejiklian, was removed. The Police Commissioner for New South Wales, who, strangely enough, received 2 pay rises in the last 2 years, which the pay rises alone totaled $200,000. So, what was he being paid for and why? He's been removed. Dan Andrews, the Premier of Victoria, he's lost 3 of his MPs in the Victorian State Parliament. There are any number of people. All the dominoes are starting to fall. The individuals are starting to go. Media personalities are dropping off the perch. And if you look internationally, the CEO of Twitter's gone, the CFO of NBC and a few others, they're all disappearing. They're all dropping off the perch. And this isn't an accident. And so where your question was, where are we going in the next little while? It's going to be very, very good, because from my reading of it, what's happened is this. The people at the top who are giving the orders have been taken care of one way or another. We can speculate how and by whom. That's not the point. So the instructions to the middle management and below are now incoherent and nonsensical. And that's why we're getting our politicians making the most ridiculous statements and claims, to the point where the people are saying, that's it, we've had enough. For example, our West Australian Premier, which is our large state to the west, it's a $20,000 or $30,000 fine for turning up to work without getting vaxxed. Northern Territory, up north, $5,000 a day if you turn up to work without getting vaxxed. This is just complete nonsense. Now, it's having the desired effect in that it's actually galvanizing the Australian population. They're now finally standing up and saying, hang on a minute, this is ridiculous. And in Victoria, Dan Andrews just recently voted himself powers not dissimilar to that Adolf Hitler achieved in 1933. He can do anything, anytime, anywhere on his own say-so. No cabinet decisions, no discussion, no parliamentary. It is so egregious that even blind Freddie can see that this must be fought. And the good news is Victorian people have really woken up quite well, and they're fighting back hard. And the numbers in the protests were modest to begin with, 200,000, 300,000. Now it's punched up to 700,000, 800,000, and they'll be hitting a million very shortly. And so overwhelming is the evidence that we are winning and they are losing, is the media can no longer claim that a crowd of 300,000-400,000 is 10,000, because enough people are there. And so they're being compelled to actually report the truth, lest they be shown up for what they are, which is lying bastards, is the short answer for it. And so we're, in the next few months, it's going to be quite okay. The tide is in our favor, and I can see significant changes in the next weeks and months without a shadow of a doubt. It's going to be in our favor. The cabal is collapsing, and all those puppets in the polity, the bureaucracy, the judiciary, the military, academia, media, business and unions, it's the leadership of all these organizations that are corrupted. They are going to collapse, and the membership in its own way is already starting to step up and say, that's it, we're sick of you, we're going to set up a whole new organization that meets our needs. So the long answer to a short question, the next few months are going to be very good for us and very bad for the cabal.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see it. Because a lot of people, especially in the UK, again, I've been so keen to get people to realise what's going on in the States, which has been so pivotal to so much of this. Obviously, everything from, what Dr. Fauci's been very much part of in terms of the gain of function research in Wuhan to, even back to like trialing remdesivir and during the Ebola campaign and killing 53,000 people, but then using it on Americans, like the start of the first wave. You can even go as deep as that. But I think what Rainer Formish said on an interview that I watched, that he believed there was about 3,000 people like across the board at the top, these puppets basically are running all this, everything from within big pharma to politicians to heads within military establishments and other places around the world, and CEOs of large corporations, like you said. So it was only the other day, wasn't it, funnily enough, in line with the Maxwell trial starting first day, that the CEO of Twitter stepped down, and then news agency stepped down, and like you said, it's all very much aligned in our favour. It just looks bad still, doesn't it? So the normal, I guess, the everyday human eye who hasn't really profoundly followed this to the extent that we have. My good friend Steve, who was on my podcast, former Royal Marines Commando, who we've been following a lot of stuff. You know, we were talking about how the Bears factory in Germany, the vaccine factory, has been blown up, and there's one in South Africa, one in India, and obviously the top of the Rockefeller building was attacked. And you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the background that people, you know, just don't see because it's not obviously reported on the mainstream media. And I think, you know, we all talk about how bad the media is, but Australia's media has been really terrible.
It's been shocking. Australia's like it's been quarantined from the rest of the world in order to lead us into a false sense of security, a real sense of somnambulance. We're sleepwalking through the last few decades. Life is just so good here; everybody's switched off. But it's like the dodos that went extinct because they knew no natural predators. So when the sailors turned up and saw these large birds, they hunted them to extinction because the dodos just walk straight up and say hello, and get their heads knocked off or eaten. And so they quite intentionally left Australia alone to have this happy, great life. And so they wouldn't recognize a threat for what it was. And one of the most effective ways that I've found of communicating, which is completely incredible, nonsensical story, that the globalists that want to kill the entire population of the world. I mean, that's just insane to anybody until you show them evidence of them trying it before. And they look at you and say, what do you mean? I say, well, let me give you an example. And this is the ones that I like to use because it simply just shows that these people have been at this forever. And just a modest example, but it's still fairly gruesome. And you probably know, but I'll recount it for your listeners. They cannot imagine, for example, that in business leaders in Australia would engage with an enemy to kill their own people. That's just so egregious, it just wouldn't happen. Well, we know that Henry Ford provided engines for the Wehrmacht. And we know that the Rockefeller Standard Oil provided additives to the engines for the Luftwaffe because the high performance engines at altitude were knocking and they had to have this additive. So between Ford and Rockefeller, they could have ground the Wehrmacht to a halt. They could have grounded the Luftwaffe within a week, but they spent years providing this stuff to the Nazis. And so there we are. You got the Nazis killing American GIs, British Tommies, and Australian diggers, where these corporations, these individuals, were making a ton of money. And when I tell that story, people are shocked. They said, absolutely, Henry Ford was so admired by Adolf Hitler that he received the highest civilian award. And Hitler actually had a picture of Henry Ford in his office. You know, IBM helped develop the card system for accounting for the labor camps and the extermination camps. Coca-Cola developed Fanta for Hitler. It's business. And when people begin to understand that wars are fought not for high ideological reasons, that there's some crooked sod up the top making money, they get it. And there's a historical example. And then I point out that our billionaires in Australia, the mining billionaires, you know, one of them, Clive Palmer, it was reported in Forbes that he made $3.8 billion from China last year. Now, China's not a sovereign nation. China is a criminal cartel. And, you know, we have no time for that. And yet here he is making a ton of money off China while China is killing us. So nothing's changed. This is a standard operating procedure. This is an SOP for the elite. We are just cows to be milked and sheep to be shorn. And when they're done with us, they'll just throw us in a ditch. But it's hard for people to get their heads around that because most people, as you know, are quite decent. They cannot conceive of that level of malevolence. But you and I have lived and worked with people that we've seen another side to the world.
People haven't seen evil face to face, have they? Or real trauma and stuff like that, as I've mentioned before. So the thought of it doesn't bear comprehending.
Yeah, so they cannot conceive of it. And unfortunately, you know, I've lived and worked with sociopaths, clinical sociopaths. And it takes a while. You almost stare into their eyes trying to see what's fixable and it's not. It's, you know, sociopathy is a condition that sort of cognitive behavioral research, and not research, cognitive behavioral therapy is not going to fix. It's similar to being colorblind. You just can't see, you know, the colors. These people just don't have any empathy. They do what they need to do. And so people are out there destroying the world, and the people can't see it. But the good news is, bit by bit by bit, despite Australians, we're slow to anger, a reluctance to react. We're really slow to anger. We'd rather just sit down. Don't interrupt the barbecue. Pass me another beer, we'll be fine. But when we do get a head of steam up, it gets it's pretty nasty. And we're getting to that point now. Now, we're not going to react in a violent way, because that's not going to help us. And we've been advocating non-violent, non-cooperation from the beginning. And we've been successful thus far. And the Australians they're in on that. I remember seeing an image of one young bloke being wrestled to the ground and being handcuffed as by the coppers, and he looked up and went, "Aussie, Aussie, Aussie, oi, oi, oi." That's the Australian character. But we're getting there. They're getting cranky. They've had enough. And when they realize that they are sovereign, when they realize that all they have to do is stand up, and there aren't enough police and aren't enough prisons for them to stop the entire country, it's done. The moment we get enough people saying no masks, no QR codes, and no vax, we're just going to ignore you. We're just going to ignore you. We win. That's going to happen very soon.
Yeah, it's just mass non-compliance. And I think, like as you touched on there, Australia, and obviously having lived there myself, it's just a very, very relaxed, chilled kind of country. And this whole thing has been one big behavioural science exercise, as I mentioned before. Like in the UK, we've had the Nudge Group employed by Sage, which has studied the British population for a good 6-7 years before this even started, testing everything like behaviours, trends, what motivates people, what gets people down, how do you put people into fear, all that kind of, like, those studies are collecting that data from how we go about everyday life, and it's just been weaponized against us. And it's the same in every country, isn't it? They've had their own groups, like you said there, they used it against you, the fact that you're in a very chilled out, relaxed country. You never would have ever thought about seeing something like this coming. And it just goes to show you how much of a psychological war we really are in.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And it's not, it's actually progressed beyond information warfare. It's now cognitive warfare. The mind is the battle space. And again, for your non-military viewers, the battle space is the land, air, and sea, and that makes sense because they're the geographical areas in which we fight. But then you've also got the cyber domain and space, and you start to think, okay, we have to fight in other places, and cyber particularly now, that's not geographically located, but it's a domain nonetheless. Well, cognitive warfare is the battle for your mind, and not just what you think, but how you think. And we have been subjected to us, the entire globe. We've been subjected to this brainwashing, and it's nothing but brainwashing for decades and decades and decades, quite sophisticated, quite carefully adept. And so I say to people, if you think that you've come to your conclusions about life on Earth because you're a smart individual that can rationally examine all the potential inputs and come up with a series of conclusions, you're dreaming. You're literally dreaming. Because by controlling Hollywood, by controlling the stories, and here's why stories are important. That's why Hollywood is so critical. And I think it was Joseph Stalin said, if I controlled Hollywood, I could control the world. Because when you tell a story, the listener willingly suspends their disbelief. They say, okay, I know it's nonsense, but I'm going to go with it because the story is interesting. And so it bypasses the prefrontal cortex of the brain, that rational analysis machine in the front of your head. And it goes straight to the back of the brain, and you accept even the most nonsensical story. Now, you do this decade after decade after decade, and you start when the kids are young, and you pump out the most ridiculous nonsense. By the time they hit 21, 22, 23, they're brainwashed, they're done. Now I'm lucky. I'm 61 years old, so I've been around the block a few times. I was raised in a very different world to the one in which we're living now, and I'm grateful for that. And I can raise my kids knowing that there is a better way of living than what most young kids have got going today.
Yeah.
So we've been brainwashed, and it's going to take us decades. And I've said this to our team: it's going to take us decades to really repair all the damage that's been done to Australia.
Yeah, and the whole brainwashing thing is like a worldwide Western issue anywhere that's got TV, basically, because that's basically what's happened. It's just been used as a weapon against us to, hypnotize people in essence. That's why they say, apart from many other reasons, keeping people in lockdowns and getting people just tuned into Netflix and Disney and everything else, which was all big part of the plan. As well as obviously rolling out the 5G. And it's it just goes to show you like exactly that, because we're seeing the fallout of the brainwashing right now, and I guess the cognitive dissonance. I think a lot of it is because people don't want to think that the thought of their government doing something so sinister would cripple them on the inside, knowing it's real. And that's the kind of like feedback I've had. And, you know, I'm sure you're the same. You've had loads of arguments with people who can't see it, and you just, they think you're an absolute loony nut job and you're just scaremongering people. But I think deep down they come from a place of emotion and fear, because they've obviously decided at that point to have the vaccine themselves. So you can instantly tell that that's where they're coming from. Do you think, I mean, I know the governments in all countries completely lie about statistics. I don't think it's anywhere near what they reckon it is here in the UK. Do you think you're going to get anywhere near people having to have boosters in Australia to be able to partake in society? Because at the minute it's like you have to be vaccinated, isn't it? Like Queensland, 17th of December. Do you think you'll get anywhere near people needing boosters?
Well, they're already there. You've had your first shot and your second shot, and they're claiming vax rates of, and we shouldn't call it a vaccine because it's not a vaccine. No, it's an experimental jab, let's call it that. And they're claiming 60, 70, 80% compliance. Absolute lie, bald-faced lie. It's lucky if it's 40%. Now that leaves 60, and I've broken that into two parts. 40% that under no circumstances are going to touch it, and 20% aren't quite sure, but they're a bit leery. And that's good, because that means we've got well over 50%, about 60% of the Australian population saying, no, you don't. You're not touching us. And so that's why the pushback is coming, because they had the first shot, and then you got to have the second shot. And now these ridiculous boosters, and 10 seconds grueling research on the internet will show you that they have these planned variants coming out at the time they're in the future. And so no, I think the pushback will become so overwhelming that the whole system will collapse. The lie will become unsupportable. And people will just wave off and say, no, you don't. We're not doing this.
I think that's very similar to what we're finding here in the UK, just from my observations from the last week, because I do get out and about quite a lot and speaking to people, and this new super scary Transformer variant that they've brought out is obviously out and about suddenly out of nowhere, and it's the fear they're trying to strike into people through the education settings, for example. Just exactly like you said, you sort of like can't try and hit the kids first, because you can tell them what you want over and over again to the point where it coaches them, so they think it's real and they all talk about it, and they use that like in sort of negative motivation against them. And but a lot of adults are just seeing right through it, and the fact that they've done it at the same time where they're now really pushing this booster and saying you're not vaccinated unless you had your booster. And I think pretty much my whole family who have had two vaccinations, well, let's not call them that, like you said, 2 jabs, are not going to have the booster, because pretty much the majority of people are like, well, hang on a minute, I played my part like I thought I was supposed to in having 2, and now you're saying I need 3, 4, 5, however many it is, and now they're saying it's every 3 months. It's like, when in history have you ever had to have any jab every 3 months?
Yeah, exactly right. It's the analogy they use here is like, if I don't wear sunscreen, you're going to get skin cancer.
Yeah.
It's just so, as I said, so nonsensical. The people are waking up on it, thank goodness. It's just, I'm looking forward to it, because I've got to tell you, we've all had enough of this nonsense. We've been extremely patient.
Yeah.
And when the reckoning comes, and there will be a reckoning, and the media here still isn't awake. Now, I genuinely struggle to figure out whether these people are corrupt or complete imbeciles, and I mean that. You can't be that stupid that you can't go online and see for yourself the adverse reactions. Now, I can tell you this, in Oz, they do not show, not on mainstream media, they don't show all the footballers carking it on the football field. I'm not sure whether you get that in the UK on your mainstream news.
Not, it's briefly, they'll say, because we've had a lot of players collapsing, and fans as well in the stands now.
There you go. Yeah, I'm certain that what they've done to the Australian players is they've given them a saline injection instead. So they're the poster boys for for getting the jab, but they actually haven't got the jab. Because if our footballers start carking it, then I can tell you the people will switch right off very quickly. So the mainstream media isn't reporting what's happening. And it is abundantly clear that bad things are happening. So the reckoning will come and the media will be up there. And when we mention Nuremberg 2.0, that's not a throwaway. We're not trying to be dramatic. There will be a reckoning, and we will be conducting and I'm sure people are saying that it should be an international tribunal. Well, I'm of the opinion the Australian people need to try these people for ourselves.
Yeah, 100%.
Capital punishment was outlawed in Australia a long time ago. But I got to tell you, when I started talking about it last year, they called me a lunatic, and now people are saying, can I be the first one to pull the lever? They realise what's been going on. And as I've said before, when the full depravity of what has been visited on the Australian people is revealed, I'll look like a moderate.
Yeah.
Because I tell you, there's a lot of people that are going to swing, and there are no shortage of applicants. And we're going to have people from every category. We're going to have former prime ministers. We're going to have high court judges. We're going to have police commissioners. You can name it. We're going to have everybody that has played a part in this crime of the century. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would gladly get on a plane if I'm allowed back in the country to come and like witness a lot of that. That would be pretty awesome.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're planning on becoming the party of government, and when you do, we're going to open up the place, and we're going to get back to a normal life very, very quickly. Very quickly. I said this a couple of years ago when I ran in a local by-election, and this is when COVID was just warming up and people were panicking and carrying on. I said, what's your policy on COVID? I said, stop what you're doing. Open up the economy, quarantine the sick, let everybody get back to work. What's the problem? What's so difficult about this? And so that's what we're going to do. Australia's going to be brilliant after this, I can tell you. Because on top of that, and again, this is just that military approach, because you know what it's like. You talk about the end state. You've got to work towards the end state. What are our metrics for success? And getting into power is not the trick. Most political parties, that's all they want. They want to get into power. We don't care. Our job is to save the country. Getting into power just accelerates that process. But we have several lines of operation, and politics is only one. It's the most visible, but least critical to our success, because we have a series of other lines of operation that we're working along, which I haven't revealed, and I don't intend to reveal to anybody, because we're just working, in a subterranean way, making sure things are getting back on track the way they should get back on track. But we're going to make sure that the Australian people have a chance to decide for themselves how and by whom they'll be governed, because what this has revealed beautifully, and I'm sure that the globalists didn't intend it, but our constitution is manifestly inadequate for life in the 21st century. Our 1901 constitution, it was written very well, and the founding fathers knew there was, our founding fathers, they used both Westminster and Washington as examples. So our constitution is called the Washminster Constitution. They took the best from both. But they said there was a lot of work to be done, and the pen lay firmly in the hands of the people. Well, we've got to a point now where people have discovered they have no rights. So much of what these lunatic premiers and prime minister are doing is not unlawful, if that makes sense. And this has shocked people. They thought they had the right to this and the right to that, and we're saying, no, you don't. And so we're going to have a constitutional convention preceded by an educative process so that people genuinely understand the options being given to them. There's no point throwing up, which one do you want, A, B, or C? And they don't know the key parts to a good constitution. So it's imperative the people learn the history of constitutions and what they should be looking for in the constitution. And then we'll have our constitutional convention, and the people will have a chance to genuinely and with informed consent decide for themselves by whom and how they'll be governed. And people say to me, do you have a preference? I said, absolutely, I've got a preference, but it doesn't matter what I want. What matters is what the people want. Because we've got some very, very good people in this country pursuing common law, which is great. Yeah. We have other people pursuing other approaches. But we all face the same challenge, which is to persuade the population, to persuade the people of Australia how we should be governed. And so that's what's going to happen. And we're going to come out of this. Australia will come out of this so much better, so incredibly better, that the rest of the world's going to look at us and say, can we have what you've got? Because you guys really nailed it. Because we've been working on this for some time now. We as I said, it's people ring me up and they say, oh, look, I've been in politics for 30 years. You need to know what I know because you're just a soldier. Really? Mate, if you've been in politics for 30 years, you're part of the problem. So thanks, but no thanks, you can go away. And we're certainly not running this like a military operation in the sense that it's barking orders down the line. It's much more like an SAS regiment where you get the objective and you get people to get and use their wit and their intelligence to get the results, if that makes sense. So the structure in terms of the purpose, method, and end state that we want is there. But getting into politics isn't the big deal. It's saving the country, and one is an end and one is a means to an end, and that's critical. Now we will get into power, and that will accelerate the whole process. But it's about saving the nation, and I reckon it'll be 3 generations, maybe 4, before all the damage is finally removed. Because this has been going on for decades, and it is so deep and so pervasive. It will take a long time to eke out every last bit of muck that's been shoved into our system. And it's, and I'll mention this one, and it might upset people, and it does in Australia. But the Masons, for example, they penetrate every aspect of society.
Yeah.
People get offended, and I say, look, I understand the people at the bottom end think the Masonic organization is a gentleman's club. You get to promote your business. And at the bottom end, that's exactly what it is. But what they don't realize is they're supporting, at the middle level, pedophilia. Because if you're sick, you get to slightly higher. And if you're really sick, you get into the levels where they conduct the satanic ritual abuse. And what's happened in Australia is there is a schism in the Masonic organization. It is being ripped apart. And the people at the bottom are now starting to ask some big questions. The people at the top are trying to sort of keep it together, but it's shattering. And so there's so much damage to be repaired.
Yeah.
And the big point is to give the Australian people an understanding that they are sovereign. They are sovereign.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think deep down, and again, this is something I've personally known for quite some time, and I think it just the knowledge around it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger as we see like the sheer size of this whole charade unfold. Is that like a lot of what's happening, actually, you touched on it there, comes all the way back to satanic ritual abuse and these like people at the top who go past these, or to get where they get to, go through these rituals. Not obviously like in Australia, but obviously it's a huge deal in London, DC, the Vatican, and has been for decades. And 8 million children go missing a year, like vanish. Where do they go? And again, but people don't really see that or hear that or really pay attention to it. They kind of know that children go missing, but not to that extent. There's 112,000 a year here in the United Kingdom. That's a primary school a day that goes missing, and it's absolutely nuts. But obviously, what we're seeing now through this Maxwell case, for example, and the sheer magnitude of the list of defendants that is on it, who people would never have thought of, from Hollywood and places like that, is ludicrous. But yeah, exactly like you say, it's this satanic ritual abuse is something we'd never thought would be associated with a worldwide, I guess, agenda in terms of using a experimental jab as a Trojan horse for digital ID.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and once again, it is beyond the comprehension of most people because they're just basically decent. They cannot conceive of doing something this nasty, and yet they're the monsters that are running the planet, but not for much longer, which is the good thing. But this will take time. That's what people have to understand. We're going to make great progress in the next 3, 5, 10 years, without a shadow of a doubt. But it will take time.
Do you think, obviously, the Queen Elizabeth, do you think, like, her, obviously she's around at the moment, but like it doesn't look good for her in terms of obviously her age, health and stuff like that. Do you think when the Queen passes, it will have quite a pinnacle part to play in a lot of things around the world in terms of things that the evil side collapsing? Not to say she's the top of the evil side. I mean, just because of the royal family's part in, a lot of global things that happen.
Yeah, I've actually heard that she's already passed, and what you're looking at is a body double.
I've heard that lots of times, yeah.
Yeah, and I have no direct evidence of that, but I remember when Trump was wandering through with the Queen, and he just wandered around as if she was nobody. I think that his way of saying she's of no relevance. He wasn't being ignorant and unaware of protocol. That was a very strategic move on his part. So To your question, though, when the Queen goes, if she's already gone or not, again, it doesn't really matter. The perception is she's still the Queen and she's still alive. And when she goes, what will happen? That's a very interesting question, because that will be a pivotal moment. And I think that'll liberate a lot of Brits from a past which didn't really exist, and they're going to compel to look at the new future.
Mm.
And I think that is, again, whether she is or isn't is not the point. I think you're exactly right. It will be a very important moment. Now, I'm a big fan of the truth. I want the full truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, no matter how ugly and unpleasant. But the reality is most people can't handle it, and they can't handle it fast, because you've got to be pretty robust to really look at this stuff and understand it. And when you dive into things like adrenochrome production and panda eyes and all those things that, to those who know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Those that don't, go do some research. It's just so nauseating, it's sickening. But yeah, my approach would be, because Australians are pretty robust, we really are. I'd be out with the truth as quickly as I can, as much as I can, so we can move on as quickly as we can. Because treating adults like children never helped. Yes, you can be gentle, you can do it in a measured way, but the truth is the truth. You might as well start with it, because you're going to end with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I totally agree. As a veteran yourself, what's the feel, in general, from your experience amongst the veteran community in Australia, or even within your state? Because here in the UK, it took a little while to get, veterans really kind of vocal, but now they're like I speak to so many of them all the time now, and it's growing by the hundreds. They're completely woken up, and there's another big protest in York Minster this Saturday coming, which I'm fortunately going to be speaking at as well. And there's going to be lots of veterans there again, and the numbers just growing extensively. And they obviously see the sheer magnitude of what this is. They see it as almost like a military operation in a sense, to overcome this. But also, you join the military and you've got that element of wanting to make a difference. You want to protect and serve and stuff like that, and that doesn't leave you, in my eyes, if that's why you join the forces in the first place. And I'm seeing that a lot, and I definitely think the veteran community is going to be needed extensively over the coming year, especially to help within communities. Is the feel amongst the veterans in Australia like pretty strong?
No, not really. There isn't the response that I thought we'd get, and I had to think about that and ask myself why. Why are the Australian veterans not as animated as others say? And I had a look at it. As I said, there are no white hats that I can find in the senior leadership, and the Australian Defence Force has been completely sold out and betrayed by every general, admiral, and air marshal. Because even if they're not complicit in the crimes against the people, their silence certainly condemns them. So anybody, I guess, brigadier and above, forget it. They're shot. Then you got the diggers themselves, the sort of the junior officers, middle to junior officers down, colonel down, and the diggers. And they're so well trained and so obedient that they've lost the capacity to think for themselves, and they cannot conceive of what's going on. That's the current serving mob. And I do get communications, but mostly from senior NCOs, warrant officers, and some junior officers, mainly concerned because they can see what's going on. But then the veterans themselves, surprisingly silent. They can see it, but our vets get treated so badly, and this is not uncommon. I'm sure the UK is similar, the US is similar. The vets are almost neglected to the point of criminal. And so the veteran community, in large measure, is damaged. And so they're incapable of actually standing up and fighting again, because it's like going to the RAP and saying, come on, fellas, we've got another fight, grab your gun, let's go. And these guys are all wounded and amputated. And psychologically, many of them are. So we don't have a lot to draw on there. So I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed that the more veterans don't. In fact, I did a piece to camera where I did an old-fashioned colonel's dummy spit and told them to stiffen up, get on with the job. But no, it's not as active as I would have liked, but I consider what's going to happen down the track. It's that the veterans are going to have a major job in reforming this nation in terms of providing the leadership for the rest of the country of how we're going to get through it. Because what Australia One's about again, it's not about getting into power. It's very straightforward. Our purpose, as you know, an intention comprises three parts: purpose, method, and state. Purpose, save Australia. That's what we do. And it's like the mission. Forget everything else, but remember the mission to save the country. The method is key. And the method is that Australia One is to assist everyone to reach their highest individual potential so that collectively all can participate in the reformation of the country. Now, this is unique for a political organisation, to help everyone reach their individual potential, their highest individual potential, so that collectively all can participate in the reformation of the country. Now, this is the single most difficult way of doing it. You know, you're better off just doing a top-down bark orders and get the job done. The trouble is that doesn't empower the people. The people have to be taught and learn how to lead themselves. And even the structure of our organisation, it is a training program. You start as a member of a branch, and then you might become a branch president, and then you work your way up and get trusted, you get voted up to electorate president, and then maybe a state president, and then eventually this is within the organisation. So there's this whole training program. By living and working in this organisation, the people will learn to take control of their nation. And this is key because it's been intentionally removed from them, any understanding of civics, any understanding of their rights and responsibilities. And so the veterans, I hope, and I'm fairly sure, we're going to get a lot of veterans sign up and become part of this, because it's nothing more than what they've done before, but they've time to put down the gun, pick up a pen, and actually start leading from the front by example, but teaching people how to do what they've got to do. And we'll do it. We will do it. We're going to create a population so difficult to govern. And that's what you want. You want strong-willed people that are difficult to govern. We want to have a system that nobody wants to go into politics because it's so bloody hard. Because we've got this 25 million people that know what the hell they want, you better not get in their way. And that's the way it should be. It should be difficult to govern free people. And that's why, and what's going to happen if we have this free people, this genuinely vocal, galvanized, free people, then only the best will get to the top, because they'll really have to earn their place. And that level of trust must be paramount. And you got that level of trust in your political leadership. And our political leaders, I keep telling them, understand this. If you want to run, understand this. You must be ready to serve. This is about service to the people. They are sovereign. You are not. You're just like the plumber. You know, the piping needs replacing. You better get in there and replace it. And if you don't, they're going to sack you or get someone who will. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's an absolutely fantastic analogy. And you're absolutely bang on. This whole thing should always be about the people, same as these elected governments are, you know, elected by the people, for the people. But what they're doing right now is very much for themselves. We can clearly see just how much puppets they are, and they're all literally having their balls squeezed, aren't they? Because, you know, of what they've gone through in the past, you know, that they don't want that spilling out. You know, you've got court cases happening. They are literally being controlled. Our government right here, right in the UK, you can clearly see isn't governing this country. There's clearly a shadow government that's like running the show. I was explaining to people the other day, a few weeks ago, the Coronavirus Act, which is supposed to get voted on to either get extended for a further 6 months or removed, was due again a few weeks back. And the week before that, one of our MPs was murdered in his office by a terrorist attack. You know, just some Somali guy just ran in and stabbed the poor gentleman like 17 times. But it was literally the news for a day. Turns out the gentleman in question was an advocate for, you know, anti-lockdowns, anti-vaccine passports, very anti-government mandates and overreach. And the following Monday, Bill Gates was in town, and it was at Westminster. Had dinner with everybody. All the health ministers and the home secretaries now all having a photo, putting all over social media. Look, mummy, I'm with the boss. And the next day, the Coronavirus Act was due to be in Parliament to be voted on, and no one showed up. It didn't even get voted on. So there was a clear and obvious message to the people that were speaking out against the overreach and the mandates, and them trying to roll out the passports and the boosters and lockdowns, etc., and all these ridiculous bills that they're trying to pass through. There was a clear and obvious message to pipe down, get back in your seat. Unfortunately, at the expense of a life of a very honorary gentleman. But again, if you take a seat back, you can actually see this for what it is. Like in that extent, you can see the corruption, you can see how sinister this really is, and that they're willing to go all out to do that. I don't know if you saw here in the UK, Sajid Javid, who's the health secretary. He literally coerced on live TV the Sky News broadcaster to go and get his jab while they're outside a hospital, and he escorted him there to do it. And I'm like, this guy is an economist or banker, and I'm like, he's got no medical qualifications whatsoever, doesn't even know this gentleman's medical history, and has just pushed him on live TV to go and get his booster.
Yeah, it's just pure criminal. This is a joke. It really is. And it's interesting you mentioned the fact these people have no experience. I was interviewed on radio some years back during one of these by-elections because I was seen as a radical in relation to COVID and the government's response. And I gave a series of facts to the interviewer, and it was our Australian Broadcasting Corporation, also known as the Australian Bolshevik Collective. And so this was I knew it was a setup, but it didn't matter. So I put the facts down, and they said, yes, but we take our information from reputable sources. And I said, like what? The World Health Organization, run by Dr. Tedros, who previously oversaw the cover-up of a cholera outbreak in Egypt, who was previously the number 3 man in a communist terrorist government in Ethiopia. This is the man you're listening to. And you can almost see the producer in the back going, cut, he's killing you. Within 24 hours, our foreign minister, that bloated cow, our foreign minister, was saying, oh, well, the leadership of the World Health might be a bit dodgy at times, but essentially they do good work. So I knew I'd hit them hard exactly where it mattered. And Maurice Payne, our foreign minister, Maurice Payne, if we hang her, I'm not sure she's guilty of anything. And if she's not, good luck to her. But if she is, we're going to have to get an arrestor cable off an aircraft carrier to suspend the weight. Now, see, that's a rude thing. I say that sort of thing all the time. And that's quite intentional because I'm beyond discussion. I'm beyond a quarrel. I'm not trying to persuade anybody of anything. I'm here to start a fight. And that's why I say things that are, so offensive. And yet they will attempt to hit me for saying something as offensive as that. And yet killing millions of Australians is not offensive.
Yeah.
And so this is, what it's like. You take the fight to them, and just when they wobble, you push twice as hard, and then you push twice as hard again, and you make sure they never get up. And that's what we're going to do. And this is why it's a soldier's job. Now, I'm sure there are better people in this country that could do this, but unfortunately, they're stuck with me, a thrice-married, foul-mouthed ex-soldier. And you know why? Because this is a fight. This is a war, and it's got to be fought like a war, short, medium, and long term. And you've got to be ready to risk. These people kill. Like that MP that was stabbed by Somali. I've got a target on my back the size of Ayers Rock. And that's fine, because as a soldier, but we both know that there's worse things than death. And so you just got to step up and do it. And we've got a succession plan. If I get taken out, that's okay. We've got someone after me and someone after them and someone after them. We're fine. So again, a smart strategy involves all these issues. The boss goes down, number 2 takes over. There's not even a hiccup. They just move on. And so that's why it's important. This is a soldier's war. It really is. And that's why the vets, coming back to your original point, they've got a big role to play in the next 10, 20 years. They really do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know you're totally right about it's all about, I guess, when you step into the leadership position that you're in, you're fully focused on your purpose. It's like I can see it in every interview you do. You can see that you're talking with absolute purpose. Your eyes is on the prize, and the conviction and how you get your message across is, like, I think why so many people buy into what you're saying. And I think your leadership style stands out a mile off, which is why so many people take to what you're saying. And as soon as I said just on my social media that, Riccardo's coming on the show, like, just the post alone just blown up, like, it was just, it was fantastic. And the thing is, when you get to like leadership positions, like you're saying, if that person either gets taken out, someone literally steps right in. It's the same as here in UK on the bad side. Like somebody like Chris Whitty, for example, who's chief medical officer. He's made the decisions he's had. He's overridden the government and the JCVIs about vaccinating children. So his damage is like done. So if he was to be taken out or removed or arrested, whatever it may be, like, there's still third-party companies going around the schools vaccinating children, so, and somebody else just steps in that place. It's like if I was to be taken out, for example, I'm not sure it would take over my podcast. I mean, this Joe Rogan guy, apparently he's a bit of all right, but I don't know if he's, I don't know if he's quite up to scratch. He may fit the bill, but yeah, exactly that. Obviously with the Australia One Party, you're doing what you're doing. You're very much leading from the front of the party itself. What is your message to Australian people that to get behind Australia One?
It's really simple. We have many futures in front of us, and most of them are pretty rotten. And Australia One is the best future for the country, because when people ask me what we're about, I say in very short summary, if you just want a few words, it's about families, children and families one, sovereignty and self-reliance, and then decency. That's it. Just going back to what we used to have, which was a decent society that has been degraded at every point, from the destruction of the nuclear family to the prevalence of pornography. It doesn't matter. The attack on the Christian faith, and they have to attack the Christian faith particularly. There's a reason why they have to do that. And it's just a decent organization with decent policies. Then we say, go have a look at the aims and objectives, have a look at the policies. You'll see there's nothing unusual about it. And the proof's in the pudding. Well, what's they saying? The proof of the pudding is in the eating. We have hardline unionists loving us. We have business people loving us as well, because it's just decent common sense about how to move forward. All these minor agendas don't get a look in because it's just nonsense. We don't care. We're not interested. People say to me, what's your plastics policy? Well, plastics policy is we're going to put it over the head of the pedophiles until they stop breathing. You happy with our plastics policy? Because there's just some nonsense out there. We don't care. And again, I intentionally use those very offensive analogies and expressions just to wake people up.
But you're saying it how it is, because we've gone past the point of like diluting the message. It needs to be said how it is. People need to understand like what is happening in this world, to get people to a point like you're saying there. These people need to have the plastics put over their head, because and taken out like they do. It's literally black and white, because people are dying, children are going missing in massive amounts, and it's been going on for decades, and it's got to the point now where this machine that they're operating, they're trying their best to not stop and take down as many people as they can in the process, via these experimental jabs.
I get criticised because sometimes I'll let fly with some Australian adjectives, soldierly language, let's say, and I really let fly. And people chip me for that, and they write me very polite letters saying that you're diminishing yourself and your message by swearing, and that's exactly true. It is very true, and I do apologise because I should be more measured in my language. But then I think to myself, what's the appropriate psychological response to the mass murder of children? What's the appropriate? And in fact, the other day there was a rally in Sydney, and we had a good several 100,000. I spoke at that, and a lady came up to me, and she would have been in her 50s, and she said, my mother is in her 70s, and when she heard you, and there's one famous one where I really let fly with as many F-bombs per second as you can possibly fit in. And she said her mother, who's an old Italian, and she has a particular view of what men are like and should be like. Apparently she wept tears of joy, and she said, it's about a fucking a time. Somebody's telling the fucking the truth.
Yes.
She has this expectation that men should step up. Now, here's what's really interesting though. A1, we have no gender quotas. That's just complete nonsense. Right? We have people in positions because they're good, and we're swamped with talented women. We have more women than men, simply just on merit. And I've got to tell you, the men have got to start stepping up. They really do. They've been emasculated for years, and they've got to shake off that nonsense and, at the risk of sounding a bit rude, grow a pair of balls.
Yeah.
No. Be prepared to protect your kids. And I actually said this a couple of times, and I did it quite intentionally, because it was almost as if they needed permission. And I made the point that if any copper gets between me and my kids, I will kill them. And then I didn't just say that. I said, I will fucking kill you. This is not a threat. This is a promise. And I said it 3 or 4 times, because it was almost necessary for them to be told, you are allowed to protect your children. The law is an ass. Protect your children. That's your primary role in life, men. It really is. And just because a gentleman in blue turns up and says, "Hand me your child," look, I'm sorry, that ain't happening. Because like the UK, I guess, Australia, most of the coppers are good guys there and girls. They're the thin blue line between chaos and order. And, we have nothing but respect for the cops. Like you, I've worked with the cops, all my military career. We work very closely with them. But then we generally have this smaller segment of these pigs in blue that use their badge and their guns to run their criminal cartels. And they're just out and out criminals. They got nothing to do with law and order. And I've got bad news for them and good news for the good cops, because once we get into power, we're going to let the good cops off the leash, and they can actually chase down the pedophiles and the corrupt politicians and the corrupt judges and all of that. They actually go and do what they signed up to do. And these criminals in uniform, they're going to spend a long time behind bars.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and say I've been speaking to the police a lot. I've been like to all the rallies, and the shift in mindset has changed dramatically. Like just in the last 2 to 3 months, they can clearly see what's going on. And obviously they speak to paramedics on all their shifts, and the paramedics are reporting just the massive rise in heart attacks, strokes and blood clots in youngsters, the children as well, which is obviously that's really then hits home, doesn't it? As soon as the kids, and it starts happening there. I had a nurse reach out to me from a fairly local hospital who said they had 11 children in with between 12 and 14 in with stroke in 2 weeks. And it's just like, when's that ever happened in our lifetime? So yeah, and these authorities, these police are actually seeing and witnessing it. And a lot of them have got kids themselves. And what we find on these rallies in London now, they're just walking alongside, just obviously just making sure everybody's safe and they get run over. And it's good to have like proper decent dialect with them. And I always give my cards out and ask them to watch the show. And I've had a few reach out to me actually, saying that they've watched quite a few episodes and they've learned a lot, and they've been part, it's getting around the offices and stuff like that, which is what the intent is. And the same within the military. I've been having a lot of military reaching out, saying that a lot of the guys and girls are now watching the show and seeing everything for what it is, which is fantastic. But yeah, it's between us, Australia, the United States, Canada, who's also got it bad, France, Italy. I think that people just really need to just be proud of standing up for what they believe in, be proud of your nation, be proud to want to serve your people. And because that's what it's always been about, isn't it? It's about helping as many people as possible. It's not a big game of, oh, I told you so. It's literally like helping as many people as possible, like fight against this tyranny, because that's literally what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are we're continuing what we started to do as soldiers. We're doing it a different way. We're still just putting ourselves between danger and the innocent. That's what a soldier does. It's instinctive in us to do that. And that's what we're doing now. We're continuing that job. Yeah,
absolutely. And I did actually see your podcast that you did. I think it came out the day before you were at the Sydney rally, and me and my veteran friends sat down and watched it and just laughed all the way through your rant. It was really funny. It was hilarious. But I did, I don't know if you wouldn't mind sharing it, but your D-Day analogy was superb. Is there any chance you could sort of just touch on that?
Sure. And let me expand upon it, because it explains how our strategy works. Because people keep telling me, asking me what my strategy is. I'm not going to tell you this is my strategy. I mean, that's a really dumb question.
Yeah.
But first of all, you can't invade the beaches of Normandy with 6 people. So we need a big army. But you just don't throw 100,000 men on a beach and hope for the best. Good luck against the 88s and the MG42s. That's insane. So what I explain to the people is this. There are different lines of operation when you're doing a large complex op. And let's say, using the D-Day analogy, one line of operation, independent of everything else, and they're not aware of it, would be the espionage going on in Berlin to gather intelligence on the enemy. Another line of operation would be the Special Operations Executive, working with the French resistance to destroy rolling stock, railway line, interfering with the manufacture of ammunition in the factories by making sure the ammunition is at the wrong caliber, so it jams when the round tries to get chambered. And that's a separate line of operation. They don't know it. Another line of operation then closer to the landing itself would be the commando raids to hit those hard targets well beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the paratroops dropping in deep behind the beaches to control traffic control points, bridges, high ground, crossroads, to retard Nazi reinforcements and to facilitate forward movement of the Allies. And then finally, you've got the naval gun fire support hitting the Atlantic Wall. And then finally, you throw the poor bloody infantry onto the beach and say, now you've got a chance. And so what I say to people is, the members of the organization, you are the poor bloody infantry, but please understand there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes to make sure that when you storm the beaches, you've got the best possible chance of succeeding. But we need big numbers, and we have one priority right now, and that's just to build big numbers, simply because the election system, like in every other country, is completely corrupted in Australia. We have not had a legitimate election in decades, and I mean 4 or 5 decades at least. It is so completely corrupted. Our Australian Electoral Commission, and I'm not saying the head of it is corrupt at all. He's a lovely bloke. I knew him. Nice bloke, bit dopey, but I'm sure he's a nice guy. But as usual, the right way to do this is you put the patsy up top and then you surround them with criminals to do the work. That's how it's done. And the Australian National Audit Office audited the AEC, the Australian Electoral Commission, some 6-7 years ago. And they failed to address any of the concerns raised by the Australian National Audit Office. The electoral roll is so corrupted, it includes names and addresses, not only dead people, but people that never existed. Whole beachfronts apparently have houses on them, but there's nothing worth sand and waves. It is a joke. And so there are challenges that we face, but you got to build that big army and numbers. I say to the people, when we have a protest, if 1,000 turn up, we have a problem. If 10,000 turn up, now the police have got a problem. 100,000 turn up, the police have got a problem. And 1 million turn up, we win. It is simply numbers. We get the numbers and we shut the place down. Now, we're planning on doing that. If we need to, we'll bring the country to a standstill. And we're building alliances with those sorts of organizations that can do it, organizations that can bring the country to a standstill, and we will do it. And it'll be simple demands. No more masks, no more QR code, no more vax. We are not playing anymore, and we're just going to ignore you. And there's nothing that they can do. Nothing.
Absolutely. And I genuinely hope that time is very, very soon for the Australian people, because there's a lot of people really, really suffering mentally now. I'm in correspondence with so many people over there, good friends. I've got family there. People are literally losing their livelihoods overnight, the right to work, the right to basically earn money and feed your family is, literally being dangled right before their eyes, something that we'd never ever thought we'd see in our lifetimes. Before we go, Riccardo, is there any sort of particular message that you'd like to give to the Australian people who maybe are kind of like sat on the fence about, what's going on right now and looking forward to the future?
Oh, that's like message to the world. First of all, everyone should save your own country. I hear all these pathetic bleats, come and save us. Oh, give me a break. Every country should save itself. There's a wonderful biblical story where this city was about to be attacked by a large enemy, and they didn't have time to build a stone wall around the entire city. And so what the leadership did was they said to every household, build a stone wall around your house. Just focus on getting your house protected. And by the time every house did that, the city was impregnable. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Same thing around the world. Every country should be looking at protecting themselves, because it makes them hard. It makes it hard to attack us if we're all protecting ourselves. So UK should look after UK. We should look after ourselves. The US looks after itself. Every country's got to step up, because this has to come from the people. Mm-hmm. We've outsourced our defense for too long. The people have to understand what it means to fight for your country on your land. And most countries don't have to do that. The Brits have a fading memory of the Blitz, very fading memory. The Australians had a few minor incursions by Japanese aircraft on the northern coast of Australia. But most countries, this is brand new. They have to learn what it means to fight for their country. That's point number one. Everyone should protect their country. Point number two, we win when this ends. The moment we get enough people stepping up and saying enough, we've won. And people will be surprised how quickly it ended just when they decided to stand up. because I get messages all the time. How much longer? How much longer? And my first question back to them is, have you attended any protests? No. You've forfeited your right to demand anything. Turn up. And if you're afraid to turn up on your own, and I understand that, it can be frightening the first time, get some friends, do it together. But as soon as we all stand up, the entire world, the Italians stand up in Italy, the French stand up in France, the Australians stand up in Australia, we win, they lose, because their control is predicated on our consent. And when we withdraw our consent, they have nothing left.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And if you give that away, your self-belief, your self-image, everything else that you've just submitted, and that's the last thing you want to do. And if everybody does that, that's when these digital IDs and everything else comes in. Then you will have no control over anything. You'll have nothing and be happy. As the agenda slogan is. Riccardo, thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to join us here on the AJ Roberts Show. I'm sure the listeners are absolutely outstanded by the way you delivered all the information you have today on today's episode. I for one am very, very grateful, and I speak on behalf of all my followers and listeners that it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you on my show.
Oh, no, thanks, AJ. And look, anytime in the future, mate, if you want to give us a call, we'll get together again and have another chat, because I think in the next month or two, it's going to be very different, a whole lot better. So let's stay in touch, and thank you very much for your kind invitation.
Yeah, thank you. Guys and girls, as always, if you like today's show, my one and only fee, as I've run no ads, is to share it with at least one person. I'm sure all the information that Riccardo shared with us today can help anybody around you in your circle, people that are struggling, people that just wanted that little bit of inspiration, coming from a leader of the caliber like Riccardo. It can only help all of us moving forward. And exactly like you said, we do all now need to stand shoulder to shoulder in the face of this tyranny together, and it will go away. But I hope over the next coming months, things do go that way. It's starting to shift. It's a great thing to see. It's a beautiful thing to see. It's amazing to see so many people coming together in the fashion they are. I, for one, have made like the most unbelievable, monumental family that I'd never thought I would ever have at this magnitude. That's for sure. But until next time, keep doing what you're doing, guys. Keep standing up, keep fighting, and I will see you again on the AJ Roberts Show.